welcome to topic 1.6, Principles of American Government. Now we know the Constitution divides power into three separate branches and gives them the tools necessary needed to limit the others. So first we have separation of powers, three branches, each has its own structure and purpose. This was influenced by Montesquieu, an Enlightenment thinker who believed that liberty survives best when power is not focused or concentrated in one place. The legislative branch, Article 1 of the Constitution, this is all about Congress. They can write laws, they control government spending. This is a phrase that you'll see a lot in the course, power of the purse. Just associate purse, money, spending, legislative branch. They can regulate commerce, trade, declare war, they create the lower federal courts, and the necessary and proper clause. This clause allows Congress to carry out laws needed to do their enumerated powers. Article 2 of the Constitution is the executive branch. This includes POTUS, VP, and other executive departments that enforce laws. POTUS, military commander-in-chief, negotiate treaties. The Senate has to ratify them, appoint federal judges, justices to the Supreme Court, and other executive officials, and the Senate holds confirmation hearings and issues executive orders. And lastly, Article 3 in the Constitution is all about the judicial branch, which interprets the laws. So their key power is judicial review, which is the power to declare laws or executive actions unconstitutional. It's important to note this came from Marbury versus Madison. This is a key required Supreme Court case you need to know for the exam. Judicial review is nowhere in the Constitution, but think of it rather as like an implied power to help the judicial branch to do their job, to interpret laws. Because of this court case, they are now able to do judicial review. So the big idea in separation of powers is each branch has its own core function and purpose. They cannot take over one another. Having separation of powers creates institutional independence and this line of authority. Next, we have checks and balances. So separation divides power into the three branches, and checks and balances helps to connect it. And each branch cannot limit the others. And you can check out the table below to check who is checking, who is being checked, and some examples of checks and balances. So Federalist 51 I have mentioned in previous videos, written by James Madison. This is a required foundational document, and it aligns perfectly with the idea of separation of powers and checks and balances. And one of the most famous lines Madison wrote is, "Ambition must be made to counteract ambition." And what he was saying was that each branch can defend itself, and each branch has the motivation to protect its authority, and institutional rivalry protects liberty. Think back to what Madison was saying in Federalist 10 about factions. Having all of these voices in different groups creates competition, this rivalry between each other, and that's great because that means there's no one voice that's dominating the conversation, and majorities will not be able to dominate. So if we split power among three branches, everybody gets a voice. There's not going to be one voice that's louder than the others. So impeachment, this is an important part of understanding checks and balances, so I wanted to highlight it. Also, to clarify, impeachment does not mean to remove or convict. Impeachment simply just means to bring up formal charges, and that process begins in the House of Representatives. If it passes the House, then it moves over to the Senate where the trial happens, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court can preside over that trial. And a 2/3 vote in the Senate is needed to convict or remove POTUS, the VP, or another executive official. And below are some presidential examples you probably remember of impeachment. Take a look at the key takeaways for 1.6, and I'll see you next time for 1.7.